Oh, I've been waiting for this. Ever since I saw this topic and read some of the book. In fact, I had a conversation with our correspondent to the pastor, Dr. John Kessler, a few weeks ago, earlier in July, about what we're going to talk about today. On that program, I told the story of a man at a grocery store who was looking at my wife, who was at the self-scan, checking her items out. And under his breath, he said, "Old people are killing me." Today's culture looks at aging as a step-by-step process to a certain point, and then it's this steep decline. We go from relevance to irrelevance as soon as Medicare kicks in. Jen Wilkin says, not Wicked, Jen Wilkin says, mark an edit there, right? The Bible gives us a compelling and hopeful perspective on aging, and I want her to tell me, us, how we can embrace our age instead of fighting to stay young all the time. How much are companies making from anti-aging creams, procedures, supplements, powders, you name it, you can buy it. What are we missing about the biblical injunction to number our days aright? Let's get going on the program From the Heart to the Heart for the Heart. We call it Chris Fabry Live. For some reason, online at chrisfabrylive.org. Our young team assembled consists of, but is not limited to, Ryan McConaughey doing all things technical. Trish is our producer. Lisa will be helping out. Josh is answering your calls. And if you play along with a home game, you know this program is listener supported. Young and old alike are welcome to support us. And we are close to the end of August and so close to our goal. I think it's 8 more people. We need 8 more people to click through or call us. Always helpful for us to meet those goals because then we don't have to make it up later on. And to thank you, this month I chose Dr. Kathy Cook's excellent book, Resolve Conflict and Find Peace and Hope with Adult Children. This morning I saw a response that hit a nerve with me. A listener gave a gift and said, the podcast with Dr. Cook was very timely. I was talking with someone today about our struggles with our adult children not talking to us and not wanting to take our advice. We realized we are not in control and they must make their own decisions. Yeah, that's a hard thing to come to, but it's true. Do you see the power, though, of working these struggles out together? That's what we do every day at the Radio Backyard Fence. And if you support us right now, we'll send that book to you for yourself, maybe in your situation, or somebody who needs it, or maybe you are the adult child and there's a fracture with your parents. Go to chrisfabrylive.org. I really think it'll help. Scroll down, you'll see how you can give a gift, a one-time gift or a monthly gift. Chris Fabry, Fabry, chrisfabrylive.org, or call 866-95-FABRY, 866-953-2279. Thanks for your support of the Radio Backyard Fence, which allows us to have conversations with someone like Jen Wilkin from Dallas, Texas. She is an author, Bible teacher. She has organized and led studies for women in home, church, and parachurch contexts. Her passion is Bible literacy and seeing people come alive when they encounter the truth of God's Word. You know her from books like None Like Him, In His Image, Women of the Word, Deep Discipleship. You Are a Theologian. Her latest is going to touch a nerve, and a lot of our listeners' lives, it's doing that to me. Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. Jen, welcome back. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.
You are way too young to write a book like this. When I first saw it, I thought, how is somebody in their 20s writing a book like this on aging? And then I read, you're not in your 20s anymore, but you're young, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm 57, so I am past midlife. I don't think I can hope that I will double my age and live to it. But I did want to write this book, if I was going to write it, before I was fully elderly, because I didn't want it to be able to be easily dismissed by a younger audience as a book that's only intended to sort of justify the way it felt for me to already be in that phase of life. I wanted this to be a book that reflected actually my recent time in midlife and how I felt that time was significant to thinking about all of life from beginning to end.
And it's really a personal journey that you take us through. I mean, you give great quotations and statistics, and you go straight to Scripture. What could be better? But you also tell about your own personal journey through this, right?
And this is a big diversion for me. I mean, anyone who's followed my ministry knows that I'm typically writing line by line studies over entire books of the Bible. I keep my drumbeat on Bible literacy because I think it's such an important thing to be in front of the church in this day and age, this age of increasing illiteracy. But when it came to the topic of aging, because I've done ministry among women now for, almost 30 years, this is a topic that I realized I wasn't hearing preached about from the pulpit. I was only hearing it discussed without any theological reference point attached to it. So like anytime something would come up in a discussion about, well, should I do this or should I do that to my body? The framework was always, well, you that's up to you. That's a wisdom decision for you. It's your body. So, it's just between you and the Lord. And that felt insufficient to me. It didn't feel like something we would say about so many other areas of life. So even though the book deals very in passing with the question of, medical aesthetics and things like that, the whole exploration of how we feel about aging felt like an important thing to bring to the surface because there's a lot of silence around it.
And the difference between men and women. Here's a quote from the book. For men, aging is presented as a game to win, but for women, it's a hazard to be avoided. Yeah. Talk about that.
Well, for men, we have very different lived experiences based on just the bodies that we're given. And so I'm going to speak in broad terms about men and women. Statistically, there will always be outliers, but generally speaking, men enjoy more physical strength than women do. And that means that for them, what aging introduces to them is vulnerability, a dependence, which is something that they outgrow in adulthood. An adult man does not think about walking down a dark alley the same way that an adult woman does. An adult woman is going to be vigilant because she knows she can be overpowered. An adult man, when I ask that question to my husband, he's like, I'm thinking about I don't know, where did I park? He just doesn't, he's 6'5". So the challenge for women in aging tends to be loss of actually what another interviewer called pretty privilege, our outward attractiveness, which has been an informal granting of power to us in our younger years, that we get noticed, so to speak. And then for men, it's the loss of the relative autonomy that they enjoy in adulthood. That's an oversimplification, but that's at least a little of what it is. There's that whole thing about how men get better as they age, they get better looking, and women fall apart. And I have laughed so hard because my husband seriously is better looking now than he was when we got, I did him a favor on our wedding day and he's doing me a favor now. And so that means that the societal pressures on us are going to be same but different. There's going to be some of the same messaging, but with different action points.
And I want to talk about that external, because a lot of this is external, and I want to know, how is the church doing with this? With the, are we the same as in society? Do we mirror? But to me, there is such an internal work on this this topic. That it's like joy is an inside job. So is aging is an inside job, and how we handle it. And this book, I guarantee you, friend, if you pick it up, you will see yourself in it, but you'll also see steps that you can take to change, to make your brain a little more malleable about what aging is doing. And if you go to the website, chrisfabrylive.org, you'll see Jen Wilkins' Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. You're going to find out more about it and the false story of aging that we've been told, it's being told all around us. That's straight ahead on Moody Radio. Jen Wilkin has written a really important book for anybody from midlife on, and probably before that. It'd be good to read it. Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World, featured resource at chrisfabrylive.org. At the beginning of the book, you say, from the moment you're born until the moment you die, you are aging. Every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every month of every year, your life counts up to midlife and down to end of life. How does that make you feel? Okay, Jen, answer that question. How does it make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel sobered. It makes me think, gosh, there are not unlimited days out there for me, and I should think about how I'm using them. I should number them well. How does it make you feel?
It's reality smacking me in the face.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story about
Yeah.
that. I had, just a few years ago, I had two publishing friends. And one publishing friend said, and they know a lot more about me than I do about the business. And one said, okay, Chris, you are 60 whatever. You've got, let's say you have 10 to 15 years. What are the 3 books that you want to write before you die? It was like, what are you talking about? I got 30 books that I want to, he said, why are you limiting me like this? So but this person was really smart and really knew what she was talking about. And so I listened to that. The other friend, he's got these piercing blue eyes and very gray hair, white hair. And he looked at me and he said, Chris, your best books are ahead of you.
Oh.
And I can't tell you, well, which one do you think I took their advice more? I think about what he said more often than what she said, and they were both right. Right?
They were both right. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I think of when you say, how does that make you feel? I come back to that story.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm sure you have hundreds of guests on every year, and maybe on one day the topic hits a subset of your listeners, and maybe on another a topic hits a different subset. But everyone who's listening to the show today is approximately 15 years older than they were when they started. So it's just a question of whether we're paying attention to it or not. This is a relevant topic for all of us, but it's one that we find many excuses to not think about. And the culture is happy to help us with that at every turn.
Well, we don't want to think about death, of course, but the growing older and the diminishment. You say that we have bought into a false story of aging. Take me into that.
So first of all, I think it's important to understand the danger of living in a false story. Like what you believe is true about the world is what will determine how you spend your money, how you spend your time, which relationships you invest in. And so say, for example, that you were living in the false story of materialism and you believed that the stuff is what life is about. That's going to impact every aspect of your life. False stories are always challenging the one true story of the Bible and the way that it appeals to every aspect of life. And so I find that a lot of times Christians don't even know what the true story of aging is in the Bible. And one of the best ways to have it emerge is to lay it against the false story that we're surrounded with. So that's things like the elderly are obsolete. We're like that iPhone that you had 4 years ago that's now in a drawer and is good for nothing but being a paperweight. And I think the obsolescence thing is pretty sticky for us in this particular generation because we understand obsolescence with greater immediacy than a lot of previous generations have because of tech. We see things age out, objects age out around us with rapidity, and we can start to view each other, to objectify each other in much the same way.
Okay, let me go through some of these, and let me say the false story, and you tell me what's true.
Great.
So the false story is aging is a diminishment. I used that word just a minute ago. A loss of identity. What's the truth?
The true story would be that aging is a completion, and it's a deepening of identity.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is not to say that we don't experience physical diminishment. We certainly do. One of the phrases I like to repeat in the book is bodies decline and people develop. And when we begin to recognize that part of our development is the result of being good students of our bodily decline, then we start to step out of the false story that all of aging is loss and into the true story that aging is about giving and taking.
The world's false story is aging is a disease. What's the truth?
We try to treat it with surgeries and with prescriptions. The true story is that aging is a gift. It's an opportunity and a privilege. Even just since 1900, life expectancy in the United States has gone from 43 years to 80 years. And that means that many of us are living through years that generations in the past in human history didn't even hope to be given. And so it's no wonder that the Bible speaks of gray hair as a crown of glory, because historically so few actually received it. And this is one of the reasons that we have such a robust false story about aging, is because so many more people are experiencing it now than in the past.
The elderly are a burden. And you tell a story about your mom in this, and so I'm going to get to that at some point. But what's false about they're a burden?
This is so pervasive in our culture, and that's because the culture values autonomy. We actually value radical individualism. We think that it is a failure if you need something from anyone else. You're supposed to be self-sufficient. So it's no wonder that so many elderly themselves and then younger generations view elder care as something burdensome. But the true story of aging is that the elderly are a sacred charge. It's not that there aren't very real difficulties associated with caring for someone who is in the final years of life, but it's that we view it through a different lens, not burden, but an opportunity to act out of gratitude for the years that have come before. So,
and that's not just putting a positive spin on it, because the Bible is teaching us. And I almost feel like when I was growing up as a kid, there was more of this honoring the elderly around us, or looking for the wisdom of those who had lived life and experienced some really, really hard times and good times, that it was different then than it is now. And all we do now is just make fun of older people who can't work there. My kids laugh at me with my iPhone. It's like, give me that, Dad. I got to do, or doing something.
Or burning daylight. Let me do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And okay, I'm slower, but I'll get there. Come on.
Yeah.
But do you see the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think the dominant thought in the culture is that the elderly are a burden. Like, if you look at the statistics on medically assisted death in Canada, just north of us, they're going through the roof. And I think it's a third of the elderly who request medically assisted death cite that they are concerned about being a burden. The idea of burdensomeness is one that is more pronounced in our culture than in other cultures. There are collectivist cultures in the world today that recognize, hey, this is actually just part of life. Families that share a home with 4 different generations, and elder care would be assumed as part of it. We have moved so far from that in the West. So, like, if you think about, when my mother cared for me in my infancy, when I was let's say I'm a 2-month-old and she's getting up in the middle of the night to feed me and change my diaper. Imagine if I'd had the power of speech to say, I'm sorry, I'm such a burden to you. She would say, this is not a burden. This is what this stage of life is for. This is what I want to do for you. I love you. I'm invested in you. But at the end of life, when very much similar kinds of care are needed, if someone lives to extremity of age, things like diapering, things like being fed soft foods because you don't have teeth anymore. I mean, the correspondences between beginning of life and end of life, there are so many of them. Why do we regard end of life care as burdensome in a way that we don't regard beginning of life care as? It's because potentiality is no longer there. We don't see ourselves as investing in something future, which is why the believer needs the retrospective. We need to understand that end-of-life care is given out of wanting to honor the gift of the life that has come before, and it's given out of gratitude. And we don't tend to think that way. Neither are aging parents nor adult children who are looking toward how to care for them. My mom's worst nightmare was that she would, quote, interrupt my adult life with her care needs, because in her view of the world and her generation's view of the world, you were supposed to grow to the independence of adulthood and leave the dependence of childhood behind, and then never return to dependence on your family again, or you had somehow failed.
And she said those words to you when you took her to a doctor's appointment. I'm so sorry I'm a burden to you. That kind of thing.
She would say it over and over again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And so I had a little mantra. I would say, "You're a person to love, not a problem to solve." And I don't know if she ever believed me. I know she knew that I loved her and wanted to be there, but I think she felt very much like a problem to solve. And that's not to say that there aren't real problems that we have to work through in caring for an aging parent or for the elderly, but it's the motive behind that care that matters. And, in the church all the time, we speak of being pro-life. It's such an important tenet of what we believe. But when we start talking about elder care, we're addressing the question of whether the church can say with truth that we value life from womb to tomb. When there's no potentiality and you give care anyway, when you give care to someone where there's no obvious reward or payoff, that's the measure of Christ-likeness. Anytime we help the vulnerable, but there's something about elderly vulnerability because it's end of life instead of beginning of life that sorts through motive in a different way, in a more incisive way.
What did walking through that with your own mom, you and your siblings, but for you, what did it do for you?
Well, I think it helped me connect. First of all, my mother encountered limitations earlier in life than my peers' parents did because she had multiple sclerosis. So she began to have mobility issues by the time I was in, early middle age. So I still had kids at home. I was one of those sandwich caregivers. Although she didn't require, round the clock care, but she needed to live near me. She needed regular check-ins. She needed to be taken to the doctor, things like that. And so I think watching her grapple with her increasing loss of independence was instructive. I hope it was instructive, but also I hope it developed in me compassion and some compassion for myself if I run into similar barriers as I age. It's been so funny. She was always frustrated that I had area rugs in my house because she was on a walker, and I'd be like, well, just get over it. Just, pay attention or whatever. Well, I don't know if you know this, but when the book came out in July, I was using a wheelchair and a walker because I broke my ankle at the end of June. Had to have surgery. So I released this book on aging, and I am in my own home thinking, why do I have all of these area rugs? And I thought, oh gosh, I need to go sit at my mother's headstone and apologize. Because I knew something that I didn't. But I think that, having walked through aging and death with my mom, now I realize more than ever that any early difficulty that we encounter, physical limitation that we encounter, or people who have disabilities, they learn this and know this in a way that I think makes the aging process maybe a little more discernible to them to walk through wisely. But anytime you have like an injury or an illness that knocks you out for a little bit, it's a dress rehearsal for aging. I think it's a chance to ask, do I have what it takes internally to endure through something like this if there's no eventually getting out of the wheelchair? Like what if that's just where you are from there on out? So I'm trying to be a better student of the early limitations that the Lord throws in my path so that perhaps that great gift of a trial that is a long life when we relinquish our physical freedoms with increasing frequency and depth will be one that I can face with greater Christ-likeness.
Wow. What do you miss most about your mom?
Oh gosh, she was so funny. She was so funny. And, I'm sure, you were telling me before we were on that you've lost your parents. In fact, I think you lost your mom the same year that I lost mine. Just the things that I want to tell her about. Oh, this TV show, you would love it. Or, oh, I just read this poem. She loved poetry and literature. She was extremely bright. And the other thing I miss is the very last thing I took out of her apartment was a sign that she had stuck to her door, and it said, Bible study here, Thursdays, 2:30. She taught the Bible until her final days. And so I miss that camaraderie. One of our funniest conversations was when we were both teaching through Romans. I was teaching it at the church. She was teaching it in her retirement community. And she said, Jennifer, I should write a book on elderly Bible study. She said one woman in the group can't hear, another woman can't see, another woman can't remember things for more than 5 minutes, another woman can't barely get through the door to get to her seat. And she's like, you're worried about interpreting the text right. I'm just trying to keep everybody alive.
Well, that is the perfect example of what you talk about. I think it's pronounced chiasm.
Yeah.
That the same thing that she was saying about her elderly Bible study is the same thing that you would say about a second grade Sunday school class.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I can't keep their attention. They won't listen. They don't. Yeah. Yes. And there are just so many correspondences like that. And in the book, I sort of build out like, what if we paid attention to those? What if we looked at how similar it is, the care we receive at the beginning and end of life? Even those moments, it was my mother's actual moment of dying that I think clicked on the light bulb for me, because she went through the labor of death. Anyone who has sat at that bedside vigil knows that it takes a lot of work to die. And she was the labored breathing. And there was a hospice nurse who said, you can coach her. There are death doulas now. Like, we see these connections. Yes. We know it connects to beginning of life.
Oh, I want you to tell me about that when we come back from a break here. You hang on right there. That's Jen Wilkin. It's a great book. We got to talk about the chiasm thing too, because that's going to click with you today. Dust to Dust is the title. It's at our website, chrisfabrylive.org, chrisfabrylive.org. Jen Wilkin is talking about the world's false story and the Bible's true story about aging in the book, Dust to Dust. It's our featured resource at chrisfabrylive.org. A couple of the false stories, true stories we didn't get to. Wisdom is found among the young is the false story. Wisdom is found among the aged is the truth. Age is just a number. That's a false story. Our days are sovereignly numbered. Aging's all about loss. Yes, aging involves both losses and gains. So if you go to chrisfabrylive.org, scroll down, you'll see a link there to Jen's book, Dust to Dust. But what you just said right there at the end of this end-of-life situation, and I experienced this with my mom, a little with my dad, though I got there late, the night that he passed away. So he was already kind of not gone, but close. But my wife with her dad, and there was a nurse that said, he can hear you.
Yeah.
And one great thing to tell him was just let him know, it's okay, Dad, we're going to be okay. It's okay to leave, that type of thing. Yeah. Is that what you experienced?
It was. We actually had my family loves to laugh, so just please know this was hilarious to us. My brothers and I had been sitting and processing some of our childhood as we were sitting at her bedside. And let's just say we had been very frank with one another about some of the things we perceived to be her shortcomings as a parent. And the hospice nurse said, this was the next day, she can hear everything. And we were like, well, shoot, because we definitely did have an unfiltered conversation. But I actually think she would have found it funny too. But yeah, we had a very similar experience. My mother died during the Omicron spike of COVID. And so when she went into palliative care, they couldn't keep her at the hospital. She came to my house. And at first I was in a panic. I was like, I can't do this. All these things I've been watching them do for her for 2 weeks. I can't do all these things. And then you realize that, in fact, not only can you, but it's just in our case, it was a real gift. It was just, it felt very sacred. So she came to my home to die. And, it lasted longer than I thought. I didn't know how long it could take a person to sort of wind things down, so to speak. And so I still remember how the nurse talked to my mother as though she was perfectly present in the room. She said, now, Carol, we're going to roll you over. We're going to need to change these sheets. And Carol, I'm going to massage your hands now. Carol, it was just this dignifying of this person at a time when, you might think, well, she's not responsive. So we can just do all this in silence or whatever. But it was this preservation of her full humanity until her final breath. It was this woman's everyday work. And then, the breathing getting harder and harder. And then that final exhale, and then just silence, silence in this room after days of that rasping, rattling breathing, just silence. And I began to connect it all to those first moments of life. Like my mother had actually entered the world in a very similar way to the way she left it. We all do. There was laboring and coaching, and then there was this enormous inhale and this piercing wail that was proof of life. The care that we gave her was the same kinds of care that she would have received as an infant. And I just got curious, about these parallels, and started wondering if you couldn't trace them inward to other stages of life. And then what would be the implication of midlife if there were these parallels? And indeed there were. I mean, if you think about it, like my stepmother is turning 80 in December. And then my mother-in-law is 82. My mother-in-law, we're trying to figure out, like, is it time for her to stop driving? Well, you see these parallels at the other end of life where you're like, is my kid ready for a driver's license? Right.
Exactly.
Let's say that my mother-in-law doesn't tell us where she's going to be for the day. And we're like, you didn't even tell us where you were going. It's very similar to the way that you can feel with an adolescent. She's losing her eyesight. As children get older, they get the freedom of all of their senses working in a mature way. All kinds of things. I've always laughed about how when my mother moved back into an assisted living space, it felt like moving into the dorm again. It was very much like dorm life. So there are all of these connecting points. And I think that if we can pay attention to the way that we moved into midlife, what were the gains, the physical, what were the gains of relative autonomy that you get as you mature? Then we can start to, rather than be surprised by it, we can start to expect and have a gracious eye toward the quote losses. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That can be our reality in a physical sense, while at the same time celebrating something that you just can't replace. And that's that interior growth that there's no way to beg, steal, or borrow. It's simply the product of the passage of time. And in the case of a believer, the work of the Spirit in the midst of it. So like, if I were to ask you, Chris, do you want to be 30 again? What would you say?
Of course. If I could know everything that I know now
That's
and
right.
go back to 30
Yeah.
and, but at the same time, I think what the point that you're making is those who are in this age group is like, no, I don't want to go back there.
Yeah, I don't want to be that
again.
dumb again.
Yeah.
Now, we were age appropriate dumb. Like I'd like to think that neither of us was dumber than average, but you get to the point where you're like, I don't want to make those mistakes again. I don't want to have to live through all of the trial and error of my early years when there are so many things now that are the intuition that is the gift of age. And I think that's why the Bible tells us that wisdom is found among the aged. It's because they are able to not just hold a lifetime of experience, but they're able to synthesize that experience into right living, into living, in the case of the believer, on the path of wisdom, and being conformed to the image of Christ.
We talked before the program. Arthur Brooks wrote the book From Strength to Strength. He's written a number of books.
What a great
and
book.
We just did a couple of programs on happiness, and he's written a lot about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've quoted him a lot this week. But it really clicked with me what his the two intelligences and the curves that he said that you can, instead of just staying on the curve of striving and getting to the top of the heap, until before you die, you jump to the second curve. And that basically what I'm intuiting is this is the curve where it's not all about you. It's about how can you help others? How can you be a mentor to them and
Yes.
be someone who lifts them in their life? Like my friend who looked at me and said, your best writing is ahead of you. That's what he
Yeah.
was doing for me.
Yeah. Well, there are all kinds of definitions for what it means to be mature. And I think that the best definition for what it means to be mature is that you are aware of and willing to sacrifice for the needs of others. Immaturity is when you are only aware of and willing to sacrifice for your own needs. And so, the Arthur Brooks book, it got me to thinking, well, if crystallized knowledge causes us to look outward and around us, if we begin to value connection to others in a way that perhaps we didn't in our youth, then one of the great values of having a mentor, someone who's further along in life than you are, is that they can pull you toward that maybe a little earlier than some of your peers. You may not have all of the crystallized knowledge that the older person has, but you could have that perspective of how can I be others focused, and not wait until I am in the second half of life. Because if that's the definition that's why, it's always funny to me when people have their first child and my husband says people live life like the first human. They're like, gosh, this is really hard. And it's like, well, honey, what did you think it was going to be? What do you think it was going to be like to be a little sassy about it? And when you are connected to people who have walked that path before you, then they can tell you things like that. They'll be like, yeah, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I remember when I hit midlife and I had that cringy, moment of, I don't want to call it a midlife crisis. That feels so trite, but it was basically that. And I said to my stepmother, I feel like I'm just off. Everything feels off. And she said, yeah, she said, I remember that. It lasted about 3 years and then it went away. Well, I needed to hear that. I was on year 1, and you're like, am I just going to be a weirdo from now on who's dealing with my mortality at every turn? And so I think that, when we listen to people who have already walked the sod that we're walking, it does two things. It gives us permission to take courage, but it also serves as a little bit of a reproach not to treat ourselves like we're the exception to every rule.
Okay, I got to know how the church is doing with these lies about aging, and I need you to talk with Barbara, who has an observation on Facebook that I just love. I think it's where a lot of people are today on this topic. Jen Wilkin has written a great book, Dust to Dust. It's our featured resource at chrisfabrylive.org, chrisfabrylive.org. More straight ahead on Moody Radio. I have a great Friday topic for you tomorrow, the word you mispronounced. About a year ago, we did this conversation. I'm still laughing at some of the stories, and you will hear this Best Up broadcast tomorrow right here at the Radio Backyard Fence. Don't you dare miss it. Jen Wilkin's with us today. I've been waiting. This is all of my expectations, and even more, Jen, with this book, Dust to Dust, and our conversation today. I want you to say a word, though, to Barbara, because I think Barbara feels a lot of us feel like Barbara. And the question on Facebook was, have you been looked down upon because you are older? What's your experience? Mm-hmm. And Barbara says, not so much looked down on as just invisible.
Right.
So what do you say about the invisibility of aging?
Well, I expect that the culture would do that. I think it's all around us. And the problem that we have to deal with is, will the church do that as well? Or is the church doing that as well? And I think that the reason that invisibility is a feature, not just of the culture, but I would say of the church too, is because when we think about passages in the scripture that have to do with aging, there's a really big one that we forget. We forget it because we have always heard it as a passage that's directed at small children. And that is the 5th commandment, to honor father and mother. And I think that what the church has forgotten is that honoring a father and mother is a command that is actually primarily delivered to adult children with aging parents. And you start to realize that when you realize that the audience for the 10 Commandments as a whole is that. Like, you wouldn't look at your 3-year-old child and say, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery. Like, those are adult-sized commands. And so also is the 5th commandment. It doesn't mean there's no application for a small child. It just means the primary application is to say to the gathered community of Israel that they are responsible for not just caring for the elderly as they take on the needs of aging, but showing honor to them while they do it. And so the reason we show honor is because of they are our superiors in wisdom and experience. And again, it's a debt of gratitude. And so I would say that invisibility is something that we just have to brace ourselves for in the culture. But in the church, it should not be so among the people of God. We should recognize and celebrate that the elderly are in our midst, and we should think about their needs, and we should think about the wealth, the generational wealth that they possess, and how to make sure that it's transferred from one generation to the next, the way that the Bible speaks of it being transferred.
What does that look like then for the church leader who's listening? How do I do that?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we've missed this is because when we think about mentorship or mentoring programs, it's so transactional. It's, okay, let's create spaces where young people can ask their questions of older people, or, if you're in a crisis, do a phone a friend and make sure it's someone older than you. And what mentorship really is just friendship. It's friendship between two people from two different generations. And so what if instead of thinking, who can I paint a target on and, get coffee with them and hit them with my list of questions? What if instead it was, I really like that person. Maybe I could spend some more time with them. One of the reasons that I've enjoyed the generational wealth that has come to me through my own mentor, my spiritual mother, is because we just like each other. Like, we don't have to prioritize spending time with each other because she's a friend. And so we enjoy being with each other. So I think sometimes we've sort of institutionalized mentorship, or that process of cross-pollination between generations. Now, that's going to mean you're going to need places where different people from different generations are mingling with each other in a way that allows for someone to say, hey, let's get coffee together.
Yeah. Is that Pat that you just mentioned?
It is. It's Pat. Yes,
Pat
we just got together.
I thought that was one of my questions. Tell me about Pat Connor, and you just did. Okay, so here's the other thing about church, and there's going to be a lot of older people who are nodding their heads about the music in church, and it's like the older folks. And I do this. I get my soapbox and say, "Where's the hymnal? I can't sing 4-part harmony anymore." How do we bridge that gap between the older folks wanting that, the songs that they grew up singing, and then the good music that's new?
Yeah, I have actually rants on this for days, so I'm going to try to keep it tamped down a little bit. And I'm not that old, I'm not the crotchety old person who just wants you to turn that loud music down. But let's give a framework for it first. Let me make sure that we pull the fire alarm before I ask you to put the fire out. The United States is facing, we throw around the word unprecedented all the time. What I'm about to tell you is truly in the history of humanity, an unprecedented situation that we call the graying of America, the rectangularization of the population. So for all of human history, we have not had a population distribution that looks like a rectangle. We've had one that looks like a pyramid, where there are relatively few elderly people at the top and there are an abundance of young people at the bottom. This had to do with infant and maternal mortality rates and people dying of all kinds of things that we have health solutions for now. But what we find ourselves with now with increasing longevity is that by the year 2035, the United States will have more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. Which means that as a society, we should expect that we will be facing a full-blown end-of-life orphan care crisis. The average nursing home costs over $10,000 a month right now. Assisted living is over $5,000 a month. And so what we're looking at is, how will the church step in and take up the slack? And is the church even a welcoming place for people who are facing the realities of old age? So now, do you want to talk about loud music?
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it's the loudness of it. It's, for most people, it is,
unfamiliarity of it.
I want it, and I want Martin Luther, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, something I can sink my teeth into, and I don't feel the same way about the choruses that I sing.
Well, I think there's good news for the elderly in that the church formula that has dominated the last 20 years of a TED Talk and a Coldplay concert, it's growing old for everyone, not just the elderly. People want something that's rooted. They want something that feels like it has been around for longer than 10 minutes. And one of the ways we're seeing this is with the return of young people to more orthodox expressions of worship, to more liturgical spaces. They don't want choose your own adventure at church anymore. So I hope that we're going to see a little of that pay off in terms of having, if not a hymnal, at least an awareness of the worship leader that their job is to curate what a church sings, not proliferate it in a way that when we are standing around someone's deathbed, we all know which songs to sing together because we've sung a few songs many times instead of a million songs once or twice. So that's a rant we don't have time for. But I do think that
it goes back to the honoring your mother and father. Part of that is if they've passed down the faith of our fathers and faith of our mothers, if they pass that down to us, then continue to give the gift that they have given to us to the next generation. And part of that is you do that with music. You do it with hymns.
Right. Right. Well, but I also think, if I were to ask you, is it right for a church to make allowances so that people with disabilities can join us in our worship time? You would say, absolutely. We absolutely want to do that. Well, part of being elderly is being a person with disabilities. You start to lose some of the capabilities that you had when you were younger. One of the things that you lose is your ability to hear at certain levels. And so the decibel level is in most churches is set a full 20 points higher than is safe for either small children or the elderly's ears to tolerate. So will we submit ourselves to the needs of vulnerable populations, or will we insist on having things the way that those in the middle of life would prefer them to be?
And will we turn the lights on? That's the other thing. Will we turn the lights on? It's like if I bring my physical Bible to church, which I do,
I need a flashlight.
I need a flashlight. I can't see because everybody else has a device, which is fine. It's just, but this is a first world problem. It's where we are, but it's showing a little bit of the pebble in the shoe, that older folks feel. And you have put your finger on a nerve here, and I'm glad you did. Because you're getting this conversation started for those of us in the church, if we haven't started already. So, Jen, good on you. Come back real soon, okay?
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
Jen Wilkin, Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. You heard it right here on Chris Fabry Live. If you go to the website, chrisfabrylive.org, we have it linked right there. Thanks for your support of the program, and come on back tomorrow for Chris Fabry Live, production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.